On August 25, 1944, Allied forces liberated Paris. It was a moment of absolute triumph, signaling the rapid collapse of the German hold on Western Europe. But for the commanders of the US Frontline, that triumph concealed a devastating truth. The advance was too fast. The sheer speed of the American ground assault had created a logistical crisis so profound that within weeks, the greatest military machine on Earth was threatening to grind to a stop. General Patton's tanks were literally running out of gas. Food was scarce. Ammunition was running low. The Axis didn't have to defeat the US Army. The US Army was about to defeat itself. The problem was distance. The supplies were 350 miles behind the front. For German generals, this collapse was inevitable. They relied on it. Their intelligence reports confirmed that the Americans simply could not sustain that speed. They saw a supply chain designed to fail. But then, the German High Command witnessed something truly unprecedented. Something they immediately dismissed as a logistical fantasy. They watched as the US Army created a phenomenon, a continuous, unstoppable river of trucks, a supply artery so vast. They called it impossible. This is the story of the Red Ball Express and how US logistics, not guns, broke the German will to fight. The invasion of Normandy was meant to be slow, but within 2 months, the US First and Third Armies had shattered expectations, breaking out of the beachheads and sprinting across France. By late August, the front line was advancing up to 100 miles a day. This blinding speed, however, hid a disaster. All the supplies for this massive force, millions of gallons of fuel, hundreds of tons of rations, and ammunition were still being unloaded at the tiny port facilities of the Normandy beaches. These ports were never intended to handle the necessary volume. Railways were destroyed by Allied bombing. The infrastructure was gone. The logistical experts called it the tail-to-head distance, the gap between the supply tail, the ports, and the fighting head, the front line. This distance had ballooned to over 300 miles, requiring 20,000 tons of supplies per day. The US Army simply could not move the food and fuel fast enough. General Patton famously said, "My troops can advance until they starve, but they cannot advance without gasoline." The crisis was existential. The German High Command knew this was the American weakness. They were betting that the US logistical machine would choke itself on its own success. This calculation fueled their defense. Hold out, and the Americans will stop moving. The invention of the Red Ball Express was born from this life-or-death realization. In a matter of days, the US Army established what was essentially a private, military-only superhighway system spanning over 800 miles across France. They named it the Red Ball Express. The name came from the red ball markers placed on the roads, and the red balls painted on the hoods of the trucks, signifying they had absolute right-of-way. The rules were unorthodox, born of sheer necessity. All civilian traffic was barred from the red ball routes. The routes were designated as strictly one-way traffic eastbound for supplies going to the front, and westbound for empty trucks returning. This maximized flow and eliminated bottlenecks. They needed 6,000 trucks to make this system work. They seized every available US vehicle, including those originally meant for non-combat roles, such as post-exchange services. The operation required relentless speed. Trucks were loaded and sent off in massive convoys, often within minutes of being fueled. The pressure was intense, but the stakes were higher. The momentum of the war depended on that continuous stream. This was the logistical ingenuity the German High Command found impossible to comprehend. Axis supply lines relied on slow, vulnerable trains and small local depots. The American system was a decentralized, resilient, unstoppable river of metal. When German intelligence reported seeing unending convoys running day and night, they thought the numbers were falsified. Their rigid planning could not account for this scale of industrialized resilience. The Red Ball Express moved 412,000 tons of supplies in 83 days. That feat was achieved not by commanders, but by the drivers. Over 75% of the truck drivers in the Red Ball Express were African American soldiers, members of segregated units who had been shunted into service and supply roles despite their desire to fight on the front line. These men faced appalling conditions. They drove 12 to 18 hours straight, often without sleep, in relentless weather, navigating pitch black, poorly maintained roads. They drove through areas not yet fully cleared of German snipers or roving patrols, putting them directly on the front line of logistics. The casualties were high. They suffered accidents, mechanical breakdowns, and direct attacks. But they kept the fuel flowing, the supplies that kept Patton's tanks moving, the ammunition that saved, the infantry, the food that prevented starvation, all were delivered by these marginalized heroes. Their grit and determination turned a seemingly impossible logistical challenge into a demonstration of American resilience. The average delivery time for a Red Ball truck was 54 hours for a round trip. These drivers understood the truth. They weren't just driving cargo. They were driving the momentum of the entire war. Their labor was the ultimate, living testament to the scale of American commitment to total victory. By the time the Red Ball Express finally ceased operations in November 1944, it had achieved a military miracle. It had delivered over 412,000 tons of supplies, ensuring that the U.S. offensive never ran out of fuel or fight. The mission accomplished more than simply moving materials. It delivered a message to the enemy. The German High Command realized that their only remaining strategy betting on American logistical collapse had failed catastrophically. The Red Ball Express was proof that the US industrial machine was not only capable of building superior tanks and planes, but was also capable of sustaining them at an impossible pace over impossible distances. When the German generals witnessed the continuous, unrelenting stream of American supplies, truck after truck, driver after driver, never stopping, they saw the ultimate symbol of a war machine that was inexhaustible. That psychological realization broke the final pillar of their defensive planning. The Red Ball Express proved that the US Frontline was more than just a line of fighting men. It was the tip of a logistical spear driven by unbreakable American ingenuity and the sacrifice of thousands of unsung heroes. This was the truly impossible feat of World War II. The Red Ball Express, a forgotten highway of heroes. If you want to dive deeper into the logistical secrets that won the war, we have more compelling stories waiting for you. Hit the like button to recognize the incredible service of the Red Ball drivers. And if you want to understand how US supremacy redefined modern warfare, subscribe to WW to Chronicles, USA Frontline, and ring the bell for the next untold chapter in American history.